We are very happy to see you again. Very pleased to have a pretty full house on this, shall we say, special occasion. The subject, no mystery about that. Kandalama has been a hotel, the K hotel has been around for a while, and we have come to the position where by and large we take it for granted. We have said, we have repeated it many times, that it is an iconic property. Location, the beauty that the scenery affords, and what the place looks like is like perhaps no other. So therefore we say iconic, and we can be pleased that it is thus recognized. But beyond that, there are some other words and phrases that can be applied with the project, with the story of Kandalama. Those words are perhaps bold, boldness, high risk, risky behavior, insane behavior, yes, unique, and therefore the story must be told for the reasons that I have suggested. Now, the author, Mr. Prema Cooray, is certainly no stranger to you, and he has been persuaded to actually relate that story. This is not Mr. Cooray's biography, neither is it meant to be a vanity project for himself. Not at all. But it is involving many inputs. In fact, some of those that can offer insights are here on the stage, and we will be drawing some thoughts and comments from them, because their inputs are to be found in that untold story, or the story that must be related. So, for ease, I will start from introducing Shirani Yasaratna, and if you don't know her by now, perhaps you might need to check your pulse. But she's known for the work that she has done with IUCN, and now also in the realm of managing biodiversity projects. Mr. Amal Nanekara entered the sphere of Kandalama in the year 1993 as a training manager, and he too has contributed vitally to the interests not only of Kandalama but tourism in general. Next to him, we have Mr. Deepal Vikramasinghe, a structural engineer. His role we will be focusing on, obviously, in the fullness of time. Next to the author on the other side is Mr. Channa Daswatta, and he has a lot that he can share, but we are going to hold him to say little. The rest is in the book. The rest is in the book. So, but Channa is an architect and vitally associated for years with Deshamania Jeffrey Bawa. And over on the further end is Mr. Ravi De Silva, also an engineer and project manager for the Kandalama project. And his contribution to the story will be illuminating, if not exciting, right? There has been conflict between these two, in a manner of speaking. Now, I'm tempted to say, and you might even be tempted to think of this volume as being a coffee table book. Yes, it does have beautiful pictures and photographs, but it has a great deal more that must be read because it is a story. The commentary matters as much as the photographs. So we would like to suggest that you don't keep it for looking at on the cover only. It must be read because the untold story lies in the pages of the text, or shall we say, in the pages of the book. Right, now, the context also matters a great deal when talking about the story, and I'm shortly going to be shutting up, and our friends on the stage will be sharing their vital thoughts. But context. Think of the period 1978 to say 1982, 1983. There was a flourishing of what we might call tourism in Sri Lanka. 1983 changed that for the worst reasons. And with that very unfortunate year of 1983, even an organization such as Aitken Spence, which was flourishing in that short period in the early 1980s, was finding themselves in the doldrums, as was Sri Lanka tourism. Innovation and investment was not apparent anywhere. They had been, and then in the 80s, it kind of, I won't say froze, but certainly dwindled. And a blue chip such as Aitken Spence, which had flourished, was now very badly affected in their hotel sector. There were other things that were going on in Aitken Spence, but that was okay. But tourism had taken a huge hit. Somebody decided to do something, and that's where the word insane comes in, risk or risky comes in, and bold comes in. I'm going to ask Prema, what was it about Mr. Michael Mack and Ratna Sivaratnam that you saw? So Michael Mack and Ratna Sivaratnam.
Yes. Both Mr. Mack and Mr. Sivaratnam, in my opinion, were at that time thrown into a situation where they needed to do something, and they found the right man, and actually Mr. Mack, who threw caution to the winds, with Mr. Sivaratnam by his side, who was more meticulous in his ways of getting things done. A fine combination altogether. And here, after 10 years of, almost 10 years of war, ethnic conflict, we decided to take this huge challenge of developing a resort not known to the industry for a good almost 10 years. We took the leap, and I still remember I had just joined the ranks, and Mr. Sivaratnam asked, how much will it cost? Actually, no one knew how much it would cost. So, we were told figures like 250 million. And mind you, Aitken Spence at that time, overall was making something like 100 million. And here you are talking of a project at a massive cost of 250 million. That didn't deter Mr. Mac, Mr. Mac, it's a good lesson to all of us. He said, we have to take this challenge. He took it, and when the bill of quantities was drawn, it became, would you believe it, 550 million. Now, who in the world would think of going through a project costing 550 million when the group itself was making only 1/5 of that? That's what you did. I still can't believe how we even thought that this dream would become one day a reality. Anyway, we took it on, and very strangely, when I think of it, Aitken Spence, I think some other, like Nilanti, who's here, she was charming, nice lady who would tell you, Mr. Mac walked into my office and said, I want to build this hotel, you better find the money. And so that's what we did. We did get the money, but that was after a rights issue. I don't know who in the world at this time would contribute to a rights issue like that. But at a premium, huge premium of 340 rupees a share, we collected the money. People, surprisingly, at that time, decided to join Aitken Spence and support them. And this did happen. Of course, that's the start of the story. It became 550 million. Still we didn't budge. We went ahead. That's the start of the story.
Thanks. Now, I'm going to ask you another question before I bring in Channa. Why Jeffrey Bawa?
Why Jeffrey Bawa? Is that the question? I think Mr. Bawa, as I knew, not very much, but for both of Mr. Sivaratham and Mr. Mac, he was part of the whole dream. They wouldn't do anything without Mr. Bawa. One day Mr. Sivaratham told me, Prema, 60% of my success is Mr. Bawa. And that was kind of attachment they had for this genius of a man.
Thank you. Yes. I am of the opinion that I have been enthusiastic about something or another, and I try to persuade somebody to do something which they are not convinced about. And I might want to, and I have said certain things to those individuals. Why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do that? And those individuals, quite often my father would say, young man, your imagination is running riot. Channa, would it be possible for us to accuse Deshamanya Jeffrey Bawa of allowing his imagination to run riot?
Well, I think Jeffrey's imagination always ran riot, but in a very elegant, quiet sort of way. It wasn't something that was quite obvious. But that's, I think, in many ways what had endeared him as an architect to Mr. Mac and Mr. Sivaratnam. He'd already built two extremely successful hotels in the then Neptune and the Triton hotels, which apparently even made money. Hence Mr. Sivaratnam's attachment. But I think in the case of the Kandalama, there was also that hiatus of 10 years that you mentioned at the beginning, 1983, and then nothing happened. And in that time, Jeffrey Bawa was working, making sketches for hotels around Southeast Asia. A book had been published about him, so there was a lot of interest in the man. And he was sort of doodling around, and I think some of us remember that time. I joined him towards the end of it. Of course, I was very fortunate to have the Kandalama as my first project. So in a way, when he was given the opportunity to build something that nothing had happened for 10 years, he was going to take it with both hands and see what he could do to do something that's completely different from what he had done before. Right up until then, he was known as he was like the poster boy for what was known as tropical modernism or regional vernacular, all of these kind of labels that he had, which he hated, of course. And here was an opportunity after a long time to push the boundaries of what a hotel or maybe what a building itself could be. And given that opportunity, I would let my imagination run riot.
Yeah, indeed. So there was a place which seemed inaccessible, sheer rock, lots of greenery, some water. Was this conceptualized right away, or did it grow incrementally in his mind, as far as you're aware?
I mean, conversations with him later on always suggested that when he walked onto the site, he knew what should be there. Basically nothing. Because he realized this was such a beautiful occasion. Whatever he built was only going to make it less of what it was. But you had to build. You had to build something. You had to allow for the occupation of that space. And in his mind was a building that would then eventually become part and parcel of that environment. And that was the initial sketches. My dear friend Sumangala is here, and one of the first sketches that were done of it, which appeared, I think, in the Aitken Spence annual report of 1991, was done by him, I suppose, with conversations with Jeffrey. And it's a kind of, it's something that grows out of a landscape. And what it has done now, of course, it has just simply grown into the landscape. And what's extraordinary is that you hardly see the hotel. And a couple of years ago, there was a magazine that said they'd like to publish the Kandalama, but they couldn't send their architectural photographers because it was soon after the Easter bombing and so on. It was to commemorate Jeffrey's 100th birthday. So I said, yes, maybe you can't send architectural photographers, but let's send wildlife photographers. And that magazine then published a wildlife shoot of the Kandalama. And that really was what the building was about. And there was one other thing that he brought about with that building, and that was that buildings don't finish when architects walk away from them. Buildings continue to grow, buildings continue to change. And he built that change into the building. And it was 5 years after we finished and walked out of the site, walked off a building which just a few minutes ago a friend of mine called something that looked like a really badly built public housing estate in New Jersey. And it was like that. But in Bawa's mind, it wasn't complete. It was only complete almost 5 years later. And there's a very touching moment I'd like to share here. By then, he had had his stroke. He couldn't speak. And I had managed to take him to the Kandalama Hotel, who had generously sort of invited him for 3 or 4 days. And on the second day, I was sort of wheeling him along, and we came through a sort of tunnel-like area from the reception out onto the garden at the back. He put his feet down from his wheelchair and started weeping. And you think, oh my God, what have I done, you know? But that was a way, in many ways, I had also been told, of someone expressing joy. And then I looked up and I realized what he was seeing. He was seeing the beginnings of the complete building. that he had imagined. So I think he did two wonderful things, which is about this idea that a building does not finish when architects walk away from it, and also to create a building that was going to become as much a part of the landscape that he found.
Thanks. Those insights are marvelous. In fact, you have gone beyond the story that has been told to provide us that glimpse into the feeling of a man who had done as much as he has. Now, to communicate this, well, we have Mr. Deepal Wickramasinghe, 29 years old at that time, 29 years old, a structural engineer. How did you receive this unusual challenge? How did you feel?
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Bawa was an engineer also. A lot of people may not know that he had an engineering degree. So all these wild thoughts were within the framework of engineering. So I didn't find it extremely difficult to understand him. And he also sometimes wanted the impossible, but at that time he will murmur something that, okay, I tried to see whether this guy can understand what he wants. And most of the times we have achieved the impossible also. Actually, biggest challenge was what he had there was we never had a proper survey plan. Most of the plans that were given to us were incorrect when we went to site. So when we set up the buildings, when the levels were formed, those were not there in existence. So we had to redo everything from the scratch. And some plans, when we went to site, had to be changed. Mr. Bawa was very sensitive for maintaining the environment, and trees were protected as much as possible, and very few trees had to be removed. One incident that triggered here, we had to do this entrance ramp, and it's quite a high one, 30 feet high. And Mr. Bawa said, Deepal, I don't want to use concrete. So when you said 30 feet and no concrete, wondering how to do it, he said, can we go for the stone wall? So if you are doing a stone wall, we need something like massive bases like about 10 feet wide. And he said, all right, let's go for natural material rather than going for concrete. Then in one incident, I think, Chandna, I think you also aware about it. I think it's nice to share that with you all. One day, myself and my partner, late Milroy Pera, went to site. Mr. Bawa followed. At that time, the ramp was being built, that present ramp, entrance ramp. So we were about half an hour early, and the contractors were setting out the road and the ramp. And there was a nice nougat tree, a small tree, about 4 feet high. The contractors had chopped off all the roots and were just hanging to a boulder with one root. So when I saw that, I also knew these carving colors are not good, but before anything happened, my partner has vanished, Milroy vanished, and I had to stay there, and Mr. Bawa was following me. Then he looked at it and I saw the disappointed face, and he had a very nice way of saying things. He said, I cannot pretend that I am not outraged. For a minute, I was wondering what the hell is he trying to tell. He can't say he's angry or something. Later on, I found that you're absolutely annoyed about it. So, as a mitigation, what we did there was, we took that boulder with that small root and built into the retaining wall. And there was a native treatment. Somebody said, use this humbas mati and covered it. So, today, I'm sure everybody would have seen that tree at the entrance on the right-hand side, 30 feet tall and very magnificently staying there. And I think it must be giving a lot of oxygen there, and also the kind of shade that you require, and it's glorified the place actually. So I think I did my part there by preserving it. Mr. Bawa would not have seen the full-grown height thing, but today you can see it is there, and also the roots have embedded into the walls, and that was something that which will never cross I will never forget that incident.
Right. So you were now well on the way. The construction has begun. The tourist board had given its approval for the project. And then you all had a challenge.
Yeah. I think that was this 100-meter reservation. It was not a challenge, it was something that came up. China, if I'm not mistaken, it was irrigation department that.
Well, the Ministry of Mahavali
Ministry
had
of Mahavali
changed some of
changed
its
it.
regulations.
So by that time, part of the foundations on the Sigiriya wing was completed. And at that time, there was no question of having this Dambulla wing. It was only Sigiriya wing and the entrance block. So Mr. Bama then decided, if that is the case, leave out that and look at the balance, what we are losing, to take it to the Dambulla side. That is how the Dambulla wing got originated. So,
Right. So that was a challenge issued by the Mahavali authority.
yes, yes, yes.
But wasn't there a challenge also from the CEA who said, oh no, is that right? Central Environment Authority?
I think the governing body was Central Environment Authority, the lady on the right-hand side. We were at loggerheads at that time, great friends now.
Right. So I was wanting you to say that.
We are talking about an era when the country really didn't have any necessary approvals from the Environmental Authority for development projects. So I think the hotels went through a one-stop shop at the tourist board and they were allowed to do their construction. But in this particular case, the hotel was adjacent to a tank which belonged to the Mahavali Authority, as Channa mentioned. So they were concerned because as engineers and irrigation engineers, 100 meters from the high flood level of a tank is considered to be very environmentally sensitive. So I think, if I recall, they were asked to get the clearance from the Environmental Authority. Now at that time, many years ago, 30 to be precise, CEA had just done an amendment to its act. And the environmental impact assessment regulations hadn't even been promulgated. So all we had was a cabinet directive saying that all development projects should undergo an environmental impact assessment. So at the time, the chairman of the authority was Mr. G.K. Amaratunga, and we had some discussions and we said, okay, let's call for this environmental clearance through this cabinet memorandum. But then subsequently, while the hotel was being built, the EIA regulations came into force in 1993 and it became a legal requirement for environmental impact assessment. So I must confess that at that time, EIA was very new to us and we were not really aware of, we had global procedures, but we didn't have any procedures that we had to follow in Sri Lanka. So we had to invent the whole thing, you know. And I don't know whether Prema and Mr. Sivaratnam, who used to visit the office so often, ever knew that we didn't know much in environmental clearances. We pretended we knew, but we had to refer and do lots of things whenever we had to do something. So the biggest point was this high flood level thing, and we had to also, it was considered to be an environmentally sensitive area under the National Environmental Act. So we then decided that we should be giving them a terms of reference for this EIA report, which we did, and Aitken Spence had to do an EIA. And the EIA was done by professionals who had never done EIAs before. Perhaps they looked at legal procedures from other countries, and an EIA was produced. The biggest contention was the water problem, because at that time the Environmental Foundation Limited was a huge force, and we had the likes of Ravi Algama and Dalanath De Silva, both lawyers who were very much active in that time. So they brought out the fact that we were drawing water. Kandalama Hotel would draw the water from the Kandalama tank, which was not the case, and later it was proved that it was taken from tube wells that the hotel constructed. So there was a lot of ups and downs, and many challenges that we had to face. The EIA had to be open for public comment for 30 days in accordance with the National Environmental Act. It was the first of its kind to be opened to public. There were tons of comments that came in because there was a huge controversy and many people were involved. And all these comments had to be sent to the Edkin Spence hotels to answer, which they did. And the thing I would like to say is that doing all this and looking back and now looking at what the product, I'm proud that the EIA process did something. You know, I mean, many people condemn the process, saying that it is cumbersome and it is, difficult and all that. But look at this hotel. Today it's an iconic hotel. It has so many environmental features that we are all so proud of, and it has won so many accolades. So doing that, even though we were not very sure about what we were doing, I think we did the right thing. Because I scanned the book and I saw some of the conditions that we had given at that stage, and I was surprised at myself because I was the director of the EIA division at that time. So, I think just to sort of, I think we did something right with the Kandalama Hotel, and I am justly proud that I was involved with its approval.
Thanks, Shirani. So those were obviously provocations from officialdom, but even as the screen is making evident, there were other things that were going on, And jumping into the middle of that was the gentleman in the corner there, Mr. Ravi De Silva, the project manager, who was not the sort of person who would go andung kundung, but rather was a man of some capacity for action. So I can only ask Ravi to comment on the various things that began to come upon you and which you had to contend with, and the shape of things as it unfolded. Don't worry too much about the slides. You tell your story.
Okay. I think everywhere we go, when we discuss about Kandalama, or even during the construction and the operation initial phases, the question is, how did you get over the objections? How did you face the challenges? Now, in the first instance, when I was interviewed by the board, I didn't know anybody in the Edkin Spence board. I was a total stranger. I was looking out for an assignment and they called me and they told me, there is a challenging project at Dambulla. Would you mind taking that over and, residing in the village and get the project going? I said, all my jobs have been challenges. I don't mind taking another challenge. And it was really a challenging and a very rewarding experience I had at Kandalama. Number one, because I myself is a villager. And I would like to mention this here. Our first general manager, Mr. U.C. Jayasinghe, also was a villager. I think that combination had a great effect on the success of the project and all the late operations. Because to understand the villagers, you have to be a villager. The other positive point was how we face the protests is that Atkins Spencer was very wise in stationing their manager, resident project manager in the village. If I was in a glass cubicle, an air-conditioned glass cubicle in Colombo and tried to manage the project, it would never have happened. It would never have happened. So we built a rapport with the villagers. The villagers were roused by various sources, political, social, cultural, religious, to object. They said this is a huge cultural problem. There will be women who will come and, start sunbathing in bikinis. Our village girls have never seen this. It will have a huge impact on our culture. In fact, I can remember a team from a girls' school came and said, "Ape sanskrutiyata mokada wenne?" Manga monawa veyi kiyalada hitanne. Nෑ අපේ බෞද්ධ සංස්කෘතියට මොකද වෙන්නේ? අයි මොකද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? නෑ මේ විදියට මේ හරියට ඇඳුම් අඳින්න නැතුව අවුව තපින්න ගියාම මොකද වෙන්නේ? අවුව තපින්න ගියාම මොකද වෙන්නේ කියන එක අවුරුදු 2500ක් තිබ්බ බෞද්ධ සංස්කෘතියකට ඕක ගාණක් නෑ. ගෑණියෙක් බිකිනියක් ඇඳගෙන අවුව තපින්න ගියයි කියලා බෞද්ධ සංස්කෘතියට බලපෑමක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙනම් ඒක බෞද්ධ සංස්කෘතියක් නෙවෙයි. That was my answer. And when most of the clergy told me, what are you trying to do? You are trying to destroy the culture. You are trying to destroy the village, the silent, nice way of life by bringing these strangers and tourists and all these, the various vices which comes with tourism. I said, no, as far as we are concerned, we will make sure that those things don't happen here because we have a system of operating. And into that system is inbuilt the cultural aspect. So, how we faced the protests was, number one, there was a lot of media propaganda with various political aspirations, religious, cultural, and all sorts of aspects. Stop this. Even there were foreign newspapers, tourist magazines, Germany, America, where they said, don't send your tourists to a place called Kandalama because that is ruining the physical environment and upsetting the indigenous culture. So those were the real forces we had to face with. But to know exactly what is happening, I had to wait there on top of the rock during the Satyagraha. I think all of you can remember the Satyagraha, the older ones can remember it very well. One of the priests in Dambulla, out of the 4 temples which looks after the 4 caves, organized a gathering, a Satyagraha, and Sarovade also joined in, provided transport. The Catholic Renaissance movement joined in the issue, Kitunu Pubudu, and even the mosque at Nikawatavana, the Muslim community also was called in, and they were all seated there, and the government was really facing a problem because there was a huge protest on all aspects. So what I did was, I also joined the Satyagraha. I also sat on the rock to observe who was coming in, who was organizing this, who was behind this. Singaling kiranam kawuda meke balallata. Eka balallatadda dekadda thunadda kiyala baluwa. Then I understood the whole thing. And I was able to convince the company, the board, which 3 times wanted to close the project because of the media hype. I said, no, don't worry, the villagers are with us. These are all external forces with various other ambitions. It will never work through. We had the confidence because we very well knew at the grassroots level that nobody in the village and the people who would ultimately benefit from the construction of the hotel in supplying, in employment, in their financial status, in their living standards, that they will be at a better position. So I was able to build a rapport with the villagers by living in the village and convincing them that this was going to be a very positive move. What I did was, many people asked me, why don't you also go to the media and tell your story? I said, no. දැන් මාධ්‍ය පච වෙලා තියෙන්නේ අපි ගියොත් අපිත් පච වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපි මොකද කරුවේ? We allowed anybody to come into the site. And of course I had to take the risk. I got them to declare an indemnity if anything happens. If nobody allows outsiders to come to work sites, but we allowed. Purely because we wanted the people to know what we were really doing. And there was nothing under the carpet and we had nothing to hide. We were open. And that was the tactic. And that was the method how we used to get over the... So gradually you could see, if anybody followed the media, gradually you could see the negative thing turning into positive. Today we are a shining example of sustainable development for the entire world. So how we countered the objections were, we were open, we allowed anybody to come, anybody could ask any questions, and we had answers, and most of the objections that the tank will get polluted, there will be a huge cultural impact, all that we countered by exposing what we really did and showing them the truth, and also assuring them, which of course they were not sure. In fact, many people told, ඔහොම කිව්වට අපි බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා. One school principal said, අපි සැකෙන් බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා. මං ගා මහත්මයා සැකෙන් බලාගෙන ඉන්න එපා. ඇස් අරගෙන බලාගෙන ඉන්න. සැකෙන් බලාගෙන හිටියම ඔයාට සැකේ අරගන්න ටිකක් අමාරු වෙනවා. So these are the realities that we faced, and we were able to come through all these objections purely because we were open, transparent, nothing to hide, nothing under the carpet. Everything was very clear, and everybody was allowed to come and see at the site. So there were very serious environmentalists who were very highly concerned. And they said, you are telling this, you are telling that, there is the EIA and all that, but how do you know whether we will do it or not? I said, okay, come and see. As you are going along, we come and see. And gradually you could see the negative turning into positive. So the approach, Arun, was openness, transparency, and also inclusivity. Initially, as I went into the village, my first job was to identify the important stakeholders. Today, business is no longer business. Now, earlier the saying was, business. The business of business is business and nothing else. The social and cultural and all these, corporate responsibilities, all that was not there. You make your profit. It is a shareholders' approach. Today it is not a shareholders' approach, it is a stakeholders' approach. And we have shown that. We have demonstrated that today for sustainability, it is a stakeholders' approach. So therefore, what we first did was identify the stakeholders. And we started a dialogue with them. From the concept stage itself, when Mr. Bawa conceived this, and I used to tell this is what we are going to do. And from that stage right up to construction and then the operations and maintenance stages, we continue, and even now the dialogue is continuing. So the stakeholders are kept happy. That is the secret, how we got over the problems.
Thanks very much, Ravi. What he didn't say is in the book. Now, there is another factor. I don't know whether Prema, you would want to comment on that. We had mentioned, Shirani did, about the court case. The matter was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had a decision that they handed over. And would you care to comment on that, Prema? What the Supreme Court said and did or offered, and what you all had then to do with that?
Yes, Arun. Well, it was the day after the verdict was given. Mr. Romesh Silva rushed to us and said, with the verdict given by Mr. Sarath Silva, there is every possibility that you will be ousted from the land that you are occupying now. That is the hotel that you are building. And he also gave the solution that if there is one person who can change it, it is only through a presidential decree. And I was told to go across and meet Mr. Bradman Veerapan and get this decree done immediately, if possible. He obliged, and we had the decree in our hands, and with that, we were firmly in place in the land, of course, at our risk. Now, from the point of view of the Environmental Foundation, they have said their case. They, in a sense, triumphed because they forced a public inquiry on us. So there was nothing that we could do other than to some or other stay in the land and do what our board wanted us to do, carry on with the project, stay in the land. We will take the risks. And that's what happened. Well, eventually, I remember speaking to Mr. Sarath Silva. I told him about our boldness to go ahead. He said, Prema, I never stopped you from building. I never stopped you. I gave you the permission to go ahead, but at your risk. And that's what you did. The battle at the courts level all went away because, in a sense, everyone lost interest in it because they achieved what they wanted. And I suppose what eventually happened tells the story.
And you also can at this point include another sort of hero in the circle, Mr. Milroy Pereira, who had a line in to Mr. Ranasinghe Premadasa.
Fortunately for us, Deepal also knows it. When we were going through this really, really bad time, Mr. Premadasa was not in the picture at all. Apparently, Dulanjali, whom I spoke to about an hour ago, and she promised to be here. She used to have the breakfast every morning with the father. and inquired why she was looking very worried. Dulanjali happened to know Deepal and also our dear departed friend Milroy, and prevailed on the president to try and help both Milroy and Deepal, because they did the housework. Mr. Premadasa, to his credit must be told, just didn't jump and say, okay, you go ahead and do it. I'm the president. It didn't happen like that. He ventured into it, went through all the details, the problems we had, and convinced himself, after speaking to the Mahavali people and all others involved in this, that it was really something he should take the challenge, and decided to support the Kandalama initiative. So we had Mr. Premadasa with us, right with us, but in the right sort of way. In fact, when you heard about the ramp and the conversation, he brought Mr. N.S. Kulasinghe and asked for his advice on this matter. Mr. Kulasinghe gave him the green light. You go ahead and build the ramp. And on that, he went to that extent to satisfy himself that it was not just what he wanted to do, but what should be done. So, there you are. Once again, a man who created a huge industry for us in garments came to our aid in a different sort of way of building a tourism empire. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we are able to appreciate then that the head of state at the time, who could have been a politician, decided that he would in fact be a statesman and view this within the framework of something professional, as would impact and benefit the community at large, going on the basis of what Ravi has already shared with us, and seen the biodiversity, its protection, and the strength that can be given to tourism as being a unique proposition in ecotourism. In other words, he became a standard bearer for that, and that knowledge being used marks this project as worthwhile and very much worthy of being told in the story. I'd like to bring Amal in here at this point. Amal, one of these microphones should
Maybe
work.
working. Which one? Which one? Okay, this one's working. Okay,
Okay.
good.
So Amal, as I said, came in 1993. You all couldn't find the people from Neptune, you couldn't find the people from elsewhere in the Aitken Spence properties to come into Kandalama, which was in the jungle. What did you do?
Very good. Actually, Arun, you did mention two very interesting factors about 1982, the history of the tourism industry. I'd like to actually, here in the audience with us is Mr. Malin Hapugado and Mr. U.C. Jayasinghe, stalwarts of the 1982 period, who brought in such a dimension to tourism at that time. Also, not to forget Mr. Gamunu Gunodhan, who was a remarkable chef at that time at Neptune. So historically, we are connected to that period as well. And also, you did mention about 1992, about the risk that Edkin Spence took. Yes, maybe Maldives was also quite a interesting area to go to. Edkin Spence originally wanted to bring people from the experience hotels that they were running, which was Neptune and Triton. They were being run very well, they were managed very well, but Mr. Cooray called me one day and said, why are we taking people who are already working? Why don't you get some new staff members? And advertisement went out in Sinhala Dinamina Lankadipa as well as Daily News as well in October of 1992, asking for management trainees from those areas. And it was interesting to see what kind of management trainees we will be able to get. And in 1902 May, we had interviews at DSA Nanaka Vidyalaya, and I'm very glad to see people like Sharif Din here, who both of us were the ones who originally interviewed. I'm equally proud of to see Ranjit Kumarasinghe with us, because he was one of those people who walked into the interview with us in 1993 with his CV asking for any kind of employment. And today Ranjit is general manager of one of the hotels and doing extremely proud. Ranjit has a unique knowledge of pairing food with tea. I don't think there are many people, Ranjit, who are able to do. He has done his masters at the University of Colombo. And so 30 years have taken a lot of those original trainees on a long journey of interest in discovery of themselves. Yes, it was a bit of a difficult challenge of teaching the difference between a fork, spoon and a knife. Sharif, of course, laughs at me how I imitated showing people what a fork was, but yes, it was necessary to be showing. People like Susit was extremely helpful in getting the money pass for, again, Mr. Jayasinghe, and Mr. Terence Martin at that time at Neptune was very helpful in getting the area sorted us for doing it. I also like to mention some of the people who were there during 1993. Mr. Hemant Ratnayaka, Mr. Tilak Selvaya, who is there, and not to forget Aline and Janaki, who have contributed very well. And without Vatsala, we wouldn't have been able to be selling our hotels in any manner. I don't know if it should be a special mention, but Gamunu Gunodhan, who is quietly seated in the corner, shoved, pushed, and made sure that everybody put on line in keeping to the culture which was Edkin Spence. It took a while to understand the culture, and it was extremely important to be keeping to those areas. Actually, what is interesting about that training that we had at that period of time is the results in 30 years. That batch of 125 whom we took from the villages of Kandalama, Sigiri, Humia, they have done extremely well. They have all been in the industry, they have gone up in other areas, and they've discovered themselves and extremely stuck to what they believed in it. And to me, that's a single most proud achievement that that batch has done extremely well. It's also nice to see our former customers like Mr. Amurgam as Mr. GLP Iris, whom have visited the hotel a number of times during when we were there. And it's extremely good to see them, not to forget Mr. Chandra Vikramasinghe as well. It was a unique experience training those staff members, because none of them knew the difference of a hotel. They actually hadn't been entertained in a hotel, they had never been to a hotel, but they thought it was an exciting challenge to be taking, which they took. The initial training was at Neptune, and we wanted to train them in carrying plates. It was really very funny the way they carry plates originally, but today all of them are completely confident in doing it. They are teaching a whole new generation of people of carrying plates and bussing trays and looking after very interesting concepts. I also like to thank the general managers who came after me and Mr. U.C. Jayasinghe, Sharif Din, Rifan, Priyan, Jivaka, who have kept the standards of the hotel in an immaculate manner and continue to do that. And that has extremely been important to make sure everything has been shining for that period of time. Continue with the good work. Thank you very much.
Priyan, who is in the audience here, was in that mob of protesters who Ravi was talking about. And finally, he joined the hotel and became the general manager. Now he's heading operations for the Aitken Spence Hotels. Protester. Protester. He's part of the picture. So these are very interesting achievements. And thank you, Amal, for having rushed through that. You know, Electrolux came in, and I think maybe Prema might want to add a thought or two. Gemunu, who is in the audience, we saw his picture up there, was one of those people who was brought back into the fold, as it were. And they decided, okay, the hotel is happening, it has happened, but we are going to be top of the range in terms of the kitchen, food, and beverage. It has to be the best in the world. Prema, any thoughts, memories?
Of course.
Microphone
It
up.
did make a substantial difference to Aitken Spence. It was all brought about by Mr. Gemunu, who had his initial training with us, but left us and migrated to Australia. One day he called me and said, "Boss, I want to come back to Sri Lanka. I'm going to give up my citizenship here in Australia." Mind you, at a time when things were very tough for us here. I was wondering how to make best use of Gemunu. So I told my dear boss, Mr. Sivaratnam, and we hatched out a plan to bring Gemunu into a new area where he would be the new head of food and beverage, specially set up now to manage the Aitken Spence hotels. Gemunu did wonders for us. He stepped in, brought in a world-famous food supplier called Electrolux. We had not seen the likes of them in this part of the world. We were always going to Singapore and collecting a few items for our kitchens. It was very different with Gemunu and Electrolux, who brought in a new dimension in food and beverage, something Sri Lanka has never seen before. This is another major achievement for the industry, done by Kandalama, and Electrolux entry to Sri Lanka signaled Sri Lanka to the outside world as one country who can create the best in this field. We won accolade after Kandalama started operations, and I am not expert at this, but it was amazing how we collected awards for what we did in food and beverage. Gemunu, it's right to bring you to focus here because you did such a big job for Aitken Spence and food and beverage in Sri Lanka in general. Something Sri Lanka has not seen before. And we beat well-known names in Colombo quite easily on assessments done by major tour operators. So this is what we achieved in a new area, which was very critical and important to our industry, to shine in that area. Kandalama Part 1 deals with the conceptual side and the brilliance of Mr. Bava and others associated. But on the second part is equally important because we produce something that we have not done before. Only Singapore and well-known countries used to talk about food and beverage, not Sri Lanka. But Kandalama made it happen. Thank you, Gemunu. Would you like to say some words?
Well, Amal likes to say some words with regard to the achievements post Gamunu intervention.
Yes, there are a lot of accolades for environment and for architecture, of course. There were a lot of compliments. But as of the hotel opened on the 26th of June of 1994, as of 1995, for 7 consecutive years, we won the best food by the Saga Travel Agency. Saga Travel Agency was something very special because they were all guests from England. They were above the age of 55, tend to be a bit fussy. And voting by them is something very special. And that we winning the award internationally for that period of time was very special for the hotel. And it was also special for the fact that the general manager got a chance of going to England to receive the award. Also in the year 2000, the award sponsored by CNN as well as from American Express, the hotel won the most outstanding service award in the world. And that too was something very special. As much as we congratulate the environmental awards, as much as we congratulate the architectural award, I think a special thank you to all those people who are responsible, including Chef Senaka, who was the first chef at the hotel to have contributed what he did to make the awards possible.
Right outside this, my friend Mario is here. Mario is a fellow of the Leeds. Leeds, as you know, is leadership in energy and environmental design. And Leeds was brought into focus by Mario because he was working with Leeds. And after a visit to Kandalama, this is what is unique in Mr. Bava. Mario told me, Prema, I can make a case for Kandalama to be certified by Leeds because we have not certified any hotel outside USA. We set about the task and did about 2 years of work with Leeds and became the first hotel outside USA to receive a bronze accreditation from Leeds, which was so valuable for us. And important to say that Mr. Bava did not know anything about Leeds, but he knew, probably foresight told him that what he was doing was appreciated by even this well-known world accredited body. So thank you, Mario, for doing that for us. And we have not stopped there now, I know. We have gone from strength to strength in Leeds.
Well, we're about to conclude the discussion, conversation that we've had. But one other thing, Prema, since the microphone is all set and ready in your hand, you know, you all started things off, went through all of the difficulty, countered the opposition, created a beautiful place, had recognition. All of that was set up with the people in position. 1995 or 96, central bank explosion happened. Tourism received another virtual death blow. 1996, says Amar. Okay, what happens to a beautiful, iconic hotel with no tourists? What did you do?
Yes, that was soon after Kandalama started its journey in tourism. This nasty blow in January 1996 brought us to the ground. We had just finished Kandalama. And in addition to the challenges we had, here we were with a hotel with no tourists virtually. So what were we going to do in 96? All Mr. Mac and Mr. Sivaratnam and all of us were wondering whether we will even survive tourism. Luckily for us, more providence than anything else, we had developed an island in the Maldives, the first of its kind by a Sri Lankan company. Maldives was a hot seller. You have 10 rooms in Maldives, you can sell 1,000. There's such a demand. And it was very difficult to get an island in the Maldives. So what we did was we spoke to our partners in Maldives who were occupying Ranalia First Hotel and told them, look here, we'll give you 80% of the rooms for, in return, you use Kandalama. 6,000 room nights on a minimum you have to give us. I mean, Maldives was such a hot seller. This operator said, okay, we'll use Sri Lanka and give you the 6,000 room guarantee at Kandalama. They didn't know what Kandalama was. So we started first year. It was no surprise when they sold the guarantee. The 6,000 room nights were given to us, and Kandalama just became known in the region, especially in the Maldives. And nothing stopped after that. All the major tour operators from Italy, which was the biggest hunting grounds of the world in Maldives, took to Kandalama purely because of our strength in the Maldives. So that created a absolute advantage for us to sell Kandalama. So we did sell Kandalama, and the whole of the Italian market rolled out to Kandalama thereafter. So that was the twin impact we had. Thankfully so, because Kandalama went from strength to strength in the Italian market from Maldives.
Yeah. Amal, you have a further comment.
Yes, 1996, Mr. Cooray was articulated now to express it. I need to be corrected. Maybe Susitha and Lilanthi might be able to correct me. 96, we had problems in January, but in April, we opened the tea factory at a cost of 250 million and opened a new office block at 750 million rupees. Ethkan Spins didn't hesitate in going ahead in that year, though things were bad.
notable. The story must be read. Now you have been provided a kind of a teaser with the conversation, and you've heard some. There's a lot that resides in the text of the book, and we would like you to think of that as required reading to be able to appreciate the value that has been brought to bear in this unique, iconic, bold venture which we refer to as Kandalama. The production of the book is outstanding, as you probably have discovered for yourself by now. It's printed beautifully, and I must mention that it has been outstandingly designed. And I'd like to mention by name our designer, Kasun Beneragama, who himself is a young man, and he has done very well. He has just been also recognized with an accolade at the State Literary Festival for designs that he's done there. So he's a young man and he's doing well. The book is beautifully presented and designed, and you are very fortunate to be able to have it, but not only have it, we'd like you to read it. We've mentioned several times the name of Mr. Milroy Pereira. Sadly, not with us, but he's also part of the genius that has been contributing to the success of the project. And the book is dedicated to the memory of Mr. Milroy Pereira. And I'm now going to be inviting Prema, the author who was in fact persuaded by Milroy in the early days to keep a record of this unique story. We're going to present it to his widow, who is with us, Mrs. Milroy Pereira. So maybe invite Mrs. Milroy to please come over to the stage. I think we are able to recognize that. So the reason we would like to invite Mrs. Milroy up on the stage is because, as you can see, Prema is hampered a little bit by his indisposition, so it would be a little more convenient to have Mrs. Milroy over here. Thank you very much. So as was mentioned, the book is dedicated to the memory of her husband. Well, I'm not part of the scene, but you are. And even as we conclude this part of the presentation, with the launch of the book, we have a final contribution. I'm using that word now, a contribution from Mr. Prema Cooray, who is very well known as not a hotelier, he's an accountant, as well as being a singer. On screen, he will be singing, and in the background will be the subject of the book. So you don't need to stand up any longer, lady and gentlemen, but enjoy the song.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I travel it, and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, But then again, too few to mention, I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, but much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew, and through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall and did it my way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried, I've had my fill, my share of losing, and now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, oh no, not me. I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the thing he truly feels, and not the words of one who knew. The record shows, and I took the blows and did it my way. Yes, it was my